please remember to leave a like, a comment, share the video about, and if you haven't already, subscribe. Thank you. Well, isn't this just fantastic? Captain's Log, Supplemental. Whole life orders can get a bit pricey for the taxpayers. We offset this cost with mandatory 18-hour work shifts in the most disgusting establishments, like McDonald's. Oh, I'm being used as practice for blacked. Hello everyone, welcome to the Halls of Injustice. Today we welcome Inmates number 173 to the ISO cubes. Inmate number 173's name is Jamie Barrow of Nottinghamshire, and Jamie Barrow is going to be with us for what will seem to be to him, at the very least, the rest of his life. A poor choice that took from this world a mother and her two very young children, who came to the United Kingdom looking for a better life. For the sake of this video, we're going to tell you the little we know about Jamie Barrow, although a lot more came out during the trial itself. The crime he committed, why he committed it, we've even got some body cam footage from a police officer, the sentence, and our own sentence. The charge he faces, or one of many, is murder, the sentence for which is minimum life, which is at least 25 years. So before we even get ahead of ourselves, skip the journey, ruin the story, because this story does need to be told, I need to tell you a little bit about Inmates number 173, aka Jamie Barrow. Jamie Barrow is a 31-year-old man that lived in Clifton, Nottingham up until November of last year. What came to light during the trial was it would be an understatement to say that Jamie Barrow was not a troubled individual with a wretched childhood and serious behavioural issues. For example, up until last November, Jamie Barrow had been self-harming and drinking heavily. As a coping mechanism, he loved riding on his motorbike. That will come back up later, that's why I'm mentioning it now. He also suffers from emotionally unstable personality disorder and had, up until the days of the crime he committed, been suffering from a, and I'll quote this, very, very low mood. His actions are impulsive because of this, which had been compared to that of an elastic band snapping in his head. Up until about the age of 8, he lived with his mother. Then he moved in with his grandmother between the ages of 8 and 14. From the ages of 14 to 18, he was living in care. A forensic psychiatrist called Dr. Vivek Furtado said that Jamie Barrow was disruptive, angry, and violent during his time in care, and that he would go from 0 to 100 at an expedited rate. He was irrationally angry, smashing things up, and he would be violent towards others. Whilst at school, he would kick off, which was the way he expressed it, so he spent much of his time isolated at behavioural units. He was suspended and excluded, and at one stage got into a physical fight with a teacher. A second psychiatrist that had recorded his interview with Jamie Barrow, where he talked about on a number of occasions during the course of his life where he'd used violence against other people. He also suffered from depression and was on the antidepressant citalopram. He was also on an antipsychotic, but before the crime, 6 to 8 months before, he stopped taking it. That medication helped to reduce negative thoughts he was having and self-harm urges. By adulthood, he'd been diagnosed with antisocial personality disorder and borderline or emotionally unstable personality disorder. From the age of 11, he had discovered fire had this effect on him, and he started his first one when he was just 14 years old. He found bonfires to be quite soothing. At the age of 15, he had threatened to set a person on fire using a deodorant can. He went on to say, "Then I set a fire at the back of the children's home and sat watching it for hours." This is still, by the way, to Dr. Kennedy. He also said that when he was younger, he caused harm to animals, and it always helped him with stress, and it had always been cathartic. One of his neighbours wasn't overly fond of Jamie Barrow, and said that he knew he wanted to move from Fair Isle Close because of those angry mood swings, as she observed Jamie Barrow getting angrier and angrier, but not discussing it with anyone outwardly in the months leading up to the crime he committed. This information should adequately convey just how much of a prick he is. We should now get to the crime. The crime concerns Fatoumata Hidara and her two children, Fatima and Neymar. I have, for the sake of this video, blurred the children's faces out. We're not doing that here. There is one other person. His name is Abubakar Drameh. If I've mispronounced your name, I am incredibly sorry. I'm not trying to be disrespectful in the slightest. but he was in America at the time. He is the father of those 2 children and the husband to Fatoumata Hidara. So let us now talk about the crimes of inmates number 173. For this segment, I want to give you a rundown of what happened leading up to the crime and the crime itself. On November the 16th, Fatoumata Hidara and her children went to stay with her parents. They returned on the 19th of November. Her father drove them back and one of her sisters went with them. Her father and sister helped take the children into the flat. Fatoumata Hidara's mother called at 5:51 p.m. and they spoke for 5 minutes. During the call, she could hear the children in the background because they were excited and bickering over a new toy they were given. Skip ahead one day. Up to this point, Jamie Barrow had a grievance with Fatoumata. His grievance was he believed that she was putting rubbish bags down an alleyway between their apartments. Very serious one, of course. On the day of the crime committed, Jamie Barrow went and left his apartment twice. The first time he took his dog with him to go and get more beer. The second time he vanished and came back 15 minutes later. A neighbour had confirmed that Fatoumata was in her home at that point because the hallway light was always left on when she was home with a pram left outside. Because they both lived in similar apartment buildings, Jamie Barrow knew the layout of the building and knew the only way in and out was through the front door. No escape essentially. On the day the crime was committed, Jamie Barrow consumed at least 10 cans of beer. That much is confirmed. The first time he left he bought 6, the second time he left he bought 4. Owing to his disdain of Fatoumata and her family, he decided to empty the petrol tank of his motorbike and use that as a suitable way of getting his own catharsis and being a violent dickhead at the same time. Trigger warning, the next part isn't nice. He then took the petrol and poured it through her letterbox and set it on fire. He then left the property through the front door. He stood outside while the fire kicked off. Screams could be heard from the property and he did nothing, eventually just walking away. He was seen by the police. Body cam footage confirms that.
Has she already grabbed your details?
It's fine.
Say again?
That's fine.
But as you could see from that, he offered nothing really. He had, after the fire, queried as to whether or not he would receive compensation for fire damage and smoke damage done to his property because it was next door to hers. The 2 children sadly passed away in the fire. The mother, Fatoumata, passed away 2 days after her young daughters. They were at this point attempting to relocate to America because that is where her husband worked. It made sense for the family to simply move there instead, and they were applying for the necessary visas at this point. But owing to the black pill boomer not taking his medication and looking after himself, he did the one thing he thought would resolve all the problems. He denied arson, he denied murder, but he went on to admit manslaughter for all 3. Naturally, because it was eventually found the fuel came from his motorbike, he was arrested, and the charge of manslaughter was replaced with murder. Because I've already mentioned that the charge of murder is life minimum, and this is triple, by the way, there is no point me going through the law. UK law is very, very strict on this. So we're going to go to the trial. It was a 3-week trial, but I'm going to go through the more relevant aspects of it. The jury for this trial consisted of 14 members, 9 men, 5 women. Jamie Barrow faced 4 charges. Count 1, the murder on November 20th, 2022 of Fatima Dramé. Count 2, murder on November 20th, 2022 of Nima Dramé. Count 3, murder on November 22nd, 2022 of Fatoumata Hidara. And count 4, arson being reckless as to whether life is endangered on November 20th, 2022 without lawful excuse damaged by fire an address in Fair Isle Close, Clifton, belonging to Nottingham City Homes. Jamie Barrow pled not guilty. Simon Ash, KC, prosecuting, opened the case to the jury by saying, "You have heard the defendant is charged with 3 offences of murder. The defendant killed them by setting fire to their flat in the early hours of November 20th last year, it is alleged." The family at this point were asleep when Jamie Barrow allegedly started the fire. And I say allegedly because at this point it was still that. The defendant did nothing to help them, said Mr. Ash. He didn't call the fire service or alert anyone to what was happening. About 5 minutes later, he casually walked away, leaving Mrs. Hidara and Fatima and Neymar in the flat. All 3 of them died as a result of that fire. The jury heard that there is no issue that Jamie Barrow started the fire. Quote, "He admits that he did start it," said Simon Ash. The prosecution's case is that the defendant had a grievance towards the family, believing that she, the mother, was leaving bags of rubbish in the alleyway at the back of the flats. Jamie Barrow had complained to the local authority about a month before the fire. The prosecution do not accept she was the person leaving the rubbish. The man living under the flat was not aware of any issues or antisocial behaviour by her, so it is possible a form of imagination playing a part. The events that led up to and including the fire itself were then detailed to the jury, and as I've already gone through that, we're not going to go through it again. It is quite harrowing and disturbing, but part of the investigation we will now go through. Police meticulously pieced together the evidence, sending in forensic scientists and fire dogs to determine how the fire started and the origin of its deliberate ignition. It would not be long before the finger would then point at Barrow, with him then confessing to the police, who were merely gathering witness statements when they called at his flat. Within minutes of the police arriving at his home, he told them, "I need to tell you something about the fire next door. Can you get me out of here without being killed?" He confessed, "I was going to hand myself in at Clifton Police Station anyway today," but then there was silence as he was interviewed over the course of the next 5 days and he answered no comment to all questions. Police then trolled through CCTV, examined body cameras where they recorded a quite cheerful Barrow giving his address, the thing we showed earlier but without the address, yeah that. Not once had he told the truth up to the moment he was in the confines of his flat, where he went into self-preservation mode as the reality of his actions began to dawn on him. That was when he pled guilty to manslaughter. The officers then set about investigating and trying to prove murder because intent is key here. To do this, they found he'd used a household cleaning spray bottle, removed the spray nozzle and poured away the contents. He put the spray nozzle in the bin in his kitchen. He used some plastic tubing to siphon petrol from his motorbike's fuel tank into the plastic bottle. He chose the bottle because of its slim neck that would fit through the letterbox. This is how they got him. As meticulous as he thought he was being, he failed. Additionally, he tried to claim, to minimize the responsibility, that he thought the flat was empty. What a load of horse plop. At the end of this 3-week trial, and still maintaining his innocence, he was found guilty. And with that, we can go straight to the sentence, statement from the judge, and a statement from the father. Shortly before sentencing, Mrs. Justice Tipples told Jamie Barrow, "I do not accept that you have shown any genuine remorse for what you have done. You have sought to minimize responsibility for what you have done." And with regards to his belief that the flat was empty, she outright said this was a lie. She further went through what really happened that night, explaining the series of events that led up to and include the fire. She concluded by saying, "It is only you who knows why you did this. The reasons are impossible to understand from your evidence." When addressing Jamie Barrow directly, Mr. Dramé said he did not know why the defendant had started the fatal fire that took the lives of his wife and children, adding, "I am angry, I am sad, I am hurt, I am heartbroken. At the same time, I am grateful for them being a part of me. I am grateful for Fatoumata and the kids, as they made me a better person. I have no hatred to anybody in the world, including you. You, Jamie Edwin Barrow, acted like the judge and jury on that night, and sentenced me to this. The only comfort I have is that you as a person cannot do this to anyone else in this world." Jamie Barrow, inmates number 173, found guilty for each and every charge of murder and for arson, was ordered to serve at least 44 years for each charge of murder and given an additional 10 years for arson. It is unlikely during his lifetime he will ever leave a prison, nor should he be allowed to. He refuses to truthfully admit to what he did that night, and it was conclusively proven he committed those crimes. Perhaps with time, he will finally do the right thing and say he did that, not for a path of redemption, because there is no such path for what you have done. Until that day, and long after, once you finally do concede, you can rot in one of these cells. Congratulations.